The grand chamber of the Valtharian Consortium was a monument to stillness, a cavern of polished obsidian and glowing crystal that absorbed all sound and returned only silence. Here, in the heart of their vast, star-spanning empire, the weight of ages was a palpable presence, a pressure on the soul of every being who entered. The air itself, meticulously filtered and scented with the faint, metallic tang of ozone, seemed to hold its breath. At the center of the immense, circular chamber, a disk of liquid light pulsed with the slow, rhythmic beat of a slumbering leviathan, casting long, dancing shadows that clung to the high-backed obsidian thrones arranged in a silent, judging circle. Upon these thrones sat the architects of the consortium, the chosen representatives of a multitude of ancient and powerful species, their forms as varied as the stars they called home. There were the Cathar, insectoid beings of shimmering carapace and multifaceted eyes that saw the universe in a spectrum of light far beyond the comprehension of most. Beside them sat the serene, crystalline entities known as the Lumina, their thoughts echoing in the chamber not as spoken words, but as waves of pure, resonant emotion. And there were others, beings of gas and shadow, of flesh and of stone, all bound together by the fragile pact of mutual survival in a galaxy that was often cold and unforgiving. But tonight, the customary stillness of the grand chamber was a facade, a thin veneer of calm stretched taut over a roiling sea of fear. The silence was not one of peace, but of anticipation, a held breath before a storm. The liquid light at the chamber's center pulsed a little faster now, its glow tinged with a subtle, anxious crimson. The subject of their silent terror was a single, impossibly small vessel that had appeared at the very edge of their designated space, a mote of dust against the grand tapestry of their star charts. It had not announced its arrival with the customary flourish of diplomatic overtures or the arrogant roar of a military probe. It had simply appeared, a silent, solitary enigma that defied all their established protocols. It was a human ship. The word itself, human, was a whisper in the vast archives of the consortium, a footnote in the histories of 1,000 explored worlds. They were a young species, barely out of their cradle world's gravity well, their technological signatures faint and unremarkable. They were considered a curiosity at best, a primitive species to be observed from a safe distance, their chaotic, violent history a cautionary tale for the younger races of the consortium. And yet, this single, unassuming vessel had sent a tremor of fear through the heart of an empire that had stood for millennia. It had not crossed their borders. It had not made any hostile moves. It had simply waited, a silent sentinel in the void. High Counselor Vorlag, a Cathar of immense age and authority, his chitinous exoskeleton a deep, lustrous black, broke the suffocating silence. His voice was a dry, rasping sound, like stones grinding together in the deep places of the earth. "The fleet is in position," he stated, his multifaceted eyes scanning the faces of his fellow counselors. "A cordon of our finest warships, a wall of fire and steel that can obliterate a small star, now surrounds this anomaly." He did not need to elaborate. Every being in the chamber could feel the immense power of the assembled fleet, a silent promise of annihilation poised at the edge of their space. The Lumina representative, a towering crystal entity named Xyler, resonated a wave of unease that rippled through the chamber. And yet, it does not react. It sits there, in the face of a fleet that could unmake its world 1,000 times over, and it does nothing. This is not the behavior of a primitive species. Vorlag's mandibles twitched in a gesture of dismissal. It is a machine, a probe. Perhaps their primitive sensors cannot even detect the scale of the force we have assembled. He paused, his gaze lingering on the pulsating light at the center of the chamber. Or perhaps it is a bluff, a foolish gambit by a species that does not understand the game it has stumbled into. A new voice, smooth and sibilant, slithered into the conversation. It belonged to Silak, a serpentine being of shimmering scales and cold, calculating eyes, a master of espionage and a pragmatist to his core. A bluff High Counselor, a single, insignificant vessel against the might of the consortium fleet, that is not a bluff. That is suicide. And these humans, for all their supposed primitivism, are not known for their suicidal tendencies. They are known for their unpredictability. Silak's forked tongue flickered in the low light, tasting the air, tasting the fear that hung heavy in the chamber. Our observers have studied them for cycles. They are a species of contradictions. They create art of breathtaking beauty and weapons of unimaginable destruction. HFY preach peace and wage endless wars. They are capable of acts of selfless love and of casual cruelty. They are a storm, high counselor, a chaotic, unpredictable storm, and this single ship is the eye of that storm. The chamber fell silent once more, the weight of Silak's words settling upon them like a shroud. The fear was no longer a subtle undercurrent, it was a palpable presence, a cold hand gripping the hearts of even the most stoic counselors. They had built an empire on order, on predictability, on the careful calculation of risk and reward. And now, they were faced with an enigma, a variable that did not fit into any of their equations. The human ship was a question mark hanging in the void, and the answer, they feared, could shatter the very foundations of their carefully constructed reality. They had dispatched a fleet that could crack a planet in half, and yet they felt a profound sense of powerlessness. They were the masters of 1,000 suns, and yet they were afraid of a single, silent ship. The sheer audacity of it was what unnerved them the most. The quiet confidence, the utter lack of fear. It was as if the humans knew something they didn't, as if they were privy to a secret that rendered the consortium's vast power utterly meaningless. The fleet was a statement of their strength, a declaration of their dominance. But the silent, motionless human ship was a counterstatement, a quiet, chilling rebuttal that spoke of a power of a different kind, a power they could not comprehend and therefore could not fight. The long vigil continued. Days stretched into weeks, and still the human ship remained motionless, a silent observer in the vast emptiness of space. The consortium fleet, a glittering armada of warships that stretched for millions of kilometers, held its position, its weapons charged, its crews on high alert. The tension within the grand chamber grew with each passing cycle. The architects debated endlessly, their voices a cacophony of fear, arrogance, and confusion. They analyzed the human vessel's energy signatures, its material composition, its every-minute detail, but it yielded no secrets. It was a perfect black box, a void in their understanding. Some argued for immediate action, for a swift and overwhelming display of force that would eradicate this impudent intruder and send a clear message to the rest of the galaxy. Others counseled caution, fearing that any aggression would provoke a reaction they could not predict or control. The Lumina, ever the voices of reason, urged for patience, for a deeper understanding of this new and perplexing species. Xyler, their representative, resonated a powerful wave of thought that cut through the heated debate. We have built an empire on knowledge, not on fear. We have faced down galactic threats, navigated the treacherous currents of interstellar politics, and we have always prevailed because we have chosen understanding over ignorance. To destroy this ship without first understanding its purpose would be an act of fear, not of strength. It would be a confession of our own weakness. The words of the Lumina, as always, carried great weight, and a fragile consensus was reached. They would wait, they would observe, they would try to understand. But the waiting was a torment, a slow-burning fire that consumed their confidence and fed their fear. The human ship became a symbol of their own limitations, a mirror that reflected their deepest anxieties. They, the mighty consortium, the masters of the known galaxy, were being held hostage by a single, silent vessel from a species they had dismissed as insignificant. The irony was not lost on them. Then, one day, something changed. A new energy signature emanated from the human ship, a signal of such complexity and elegance that it stunned the consortium's finest minds. It was not a weapons discharge, not a shield activation, not any known form of technology. It was a communication, a message, a voice from the void. The signal was beamed directly at the consortium's flagship, a vessel of immense size and power named the Vigilance. Aboard the Vigilance, Admiral Kalen, a veteran of countless campaigns and a being of unwavering courage, received the transmission. His heart, a complex organ of crystalline structures and pulsating energy, thrummed with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. He had been a warrior his entire life, but this was a new kind of battle, a battle of wits and of wills, a battle for understanding. He ordered the transmission to be displayed on the main view screen of the bridge. The screen, a vast expanse of shimmering light, flickered to life, and the image that appeared was not what anyone had expected. There was no fearsome alien warrior, no menacing war machine, no arrogant emissary of a hostile power. There was only a single human figure, a woman with hair the color of spun gold and eyes the color of the deep ocean. She was dressed in a simple, adorned uniform of deep blue, her posture relaxed, her expression calm and serene. She was not a warrior, she was not a diplomat. She was a scientist, a scholar, an explorer. She smiled, a gentle, reassuring smile that seemed to cut through the layers of fear and suspicion that had clouded the minds of the consortium for so long. "Greetings," she said, her voice a soft, melodic sound that filled the bridge of the vigilance. "I am Dr. Eris Thorne of the Starship Odyssey. We come in peace." The simplicity of her words was disarming. The sincerity in her eyes was undeniable. Admiral Kalen, a being who had faced down fleets of warships and stared into the abyss of black holes without flinching, found himself at a loss for words. The entire bridge crew of the Vigilance stood in stunned silence, their preconceived notions about humanity shattering like brittle glass. This was not what they had expected. This was not the enemy they had prepared for. In the grand chamber of the Valtharian Consortium, the image of Dr. Eris Thorne was projected onto the central disk of liquid light, her calm, composed face filling the vast space. The architects watched in silence, their minds reeling from the unexpected turn of events. Vorlag, the arch-pragmatist, was the first to speak, his voice a low growl of suspicion. "A trick," he rasped. "A deception. They show us a scholar to lull us into a false sense of security while their true intentions remain hidden." Silak, the master of intrigue, shook his serpentine head slowly. "I do not think so, High Counselor. Look at her eyes, there is no deceit there, only curiosity, and a profound sense of sadness." Xyler, the Lumina, resonated a wave of agreement. "She is not a threat, she is a messenger, and she has come to us with a message of great importance." The message that followed was indeed of great importance. Dr. Thorne, in a calm, measured tone, explained the purpose of the Odyssey's journey. They were not conquerors, they were not invaders, they were cartographers, explorers of the unknown. They were mapping the galaxy, not for conquest, but for knowledge. They were seeking to understand the universe in all its infinite complexity, to learn from the ancient civilizations that had come before them, and to share their own humble knowledge with those who were willing to listen. She explained that their long silence was a gesture of respect, a demonstration of their peaceful intentions. They had detected the consortium fleet, of course. Their sensors were far more advanced than the consortium could have ever imagined. But they had chosen not to react, not to raise their shields, not to power up their weapons. They had chosen to wait, to give the consortium the time and the space to make their own choice, to reveal their own nature. "We did not come here to fight," Dr. Thorne said, her voice filled with a quiet, unyielding strength. "We came here to learn. We came here to share. We came here to offer our friendship." The architects of the consortium were stunned into silence. Their entire worldview, their entire understanding of the galaxy, had been turned on its head. They had prepared for a war, and they had been offered a hand of friendship. They had expected a show of force, and they had been given a lesson in humility. The human ship, the Odyssey, was not a warship. It was a vessel of exploration, a library of knowledge, a symbol of hope. The fleet that surrounded it, the mighty armada of the consortium, suddenly seemed small and insignificant, a relic of a bygone era of fear and suspicion. They had been so focused on the potential for conflict that they had failed to see the possibility of something far greater. A new era of cooperation, of shared knowledge, of mutual respect. Admiral Kalen on the bridge of the Vigilance felt a profound sense of shame. He had been so quick to assume the worst, so eager to see the humans as a threat, and now he saw them for what they truly were, a species of immense potential, a species that had chosen the path of enlightenment over the path of destruction. He opened a communication channel to the Odyssey. "Dr. Thorne," he said, his voice filled with a newfound respect. "This is Admiral Kalen of the Consortium Flagship Vigilance. We have misjudged you. We have misjudged your entire species. We offer you our deepest apologies." Dr. Thorne's smile returned, this time tinged with a hint of sadness. "There is no need for apologies, Admiral. Fear is a powerful emotion. It can cloud even the clearest of minds. We understand. We have seen it before in our own history. It is a lesson we have learned the hard way." A new chapter had begun in the history of the Valtharian Consortium. The fleet was recalled, its warships returning to their home systems, their crews filled with a mixture of relief and awe. The Odyssey was invited to the heart of the consortium, to the grand chamber itself, where Dr. Thorne and her crew were greeted not as Mice, but as honored guests. They shared their knowledge, their art, their philosophy. They spoke of their long and turbulent history, of their triumphs and their tragedies, of their endless struggle to overcome their own destructive tendencies. They were a species of contradictions, just as S. Silak had said, but they were also a species of infinite potential, a species that had chosen to embrace the better angels of their nature. The consortium, in turn, opened its archives to the humans, sharing the accumulated knowledge of 1,000 civilizations. They learned from each other, they grew together, and they forged a bond of friendship that was stronger than any alliance of convenience. The galaxy, which had once seemed so cold and unforgiving, was suddenly filled with a new sense of wonder and possibility. The fear that had gripped the heart of the consortium was replaced by a sense of hope, a sense of shared destiny. But the story of the Odyssey and the consortium was not over. It was just beginning. One day, as the human and consortium scientists were collaborating on a joint project to map the uncharted regions of the galaxy, they discovered something anomalous. A signal, a faint, rhythmic pulse emanating from the void beyond the known galactic rim. It was a signal of immense age, far older than the consortium, older than the stars themselves. It was a signal that spoke of a power and an intelligence that dwarfed anything they had ever encountered. It was a message from the deep, a whisper from the dawn of time. Dr. Thorne and Admiral Kalin stood together on the bridge of the Vigilance, the image of the signal displayed on the main view screen. It was a complex, beautiful pattern of light and energy, a language they could not yet understand, but one that spoke to them on a deep, primal level. It was a call, an invitation, a warning. "What is it?" Kalin asked, his voice a hushed whisper of awe and trepidation. Dr. Thorne's eyes, the color of the deep ocean, were fixed on the screen, a look of profound wonder on her face. "I don't know," she said, "but I think we're about to find out." The single human ship, the Odyssey, had not come to wage a war. It had come to start a conversation. And that conversation was about to get a whole lot bigger. The fleet that had been assembled to destroy it had never stood a chance, not because it was outgunned, but because it was outthought, outmaneuvered in a game it didn't even know it was playing. The true battle was not one of weapons, but of ideas. And in that battle, humanity had won a victory that would reshape the future of the galaxy. The universe was far larger, far older, and far stranger than they had ever imagined. And they were about to take their first step into that larger world together. The real journey was just beginning. The lone warship had not been a warship at all, but a key. And it had just unlocked a door to a universe they were only now beginning to comprehend. The fleet had been ready for a fight, but not for the truth. And the truth was that the galaxy was not a battlefield, but a library, and the quietest voices often held the most profound secrets. The silence of the Odyssey had been its greatest weapon, a weapon of patience and of wisdom, a weapon that had disarmed an entire fleet without firing a single shot. The consortium had prepared for an enemy, but they had found a teacher. And the lesson they had learned was one that would echo through the ages. The greatest power in the universe is not the power to destroy, but the power to understand. The human ship, with its crew of scholars and explorers, had been a testament to that power. And as they prepared to venture into the unknown, to answer the call from the deep, they knew that they were no longer alone. They were a part of something far greater than themselves, a new and powerful alliance forged in the fires of misunderstanding and tempered by the cool waters of reason. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, it was also filled with hope. The revelation of the ancient signal sent a new kind of shockwave through the consortium. The initial fear of the humans was replaced by a dawning, cosmic awe. The political squabbles and territorial disputes that had dominated their discourse for centuries suddenly seemed petty and insignificant in the face of this new, profound mystery. The Grand Chamber, once a stage for power plays and veiled threats, became a forum for scientific inquiry and philosophical debate. The architects, who had once viewed the galaxy as a finite resource to be controlled and exploited, now saw it as an infinite ocean of knowledge waiting to be explored. The humans, with their insatiable curiosity and their unwavering optimism, became the catalysts for this transformation. They did not seek to lead the consortium, but to partner with it, to share in the grand adventure that lay before them. The Odyssey, once an object of suspicion, became a symbol of this new era of cooperation. its crew working side by side with the finest minds of the consortium, their combined intellect a formidable tool in the face of the unknown. The ancient signal was a puzzle of unimaginable complexity. It was a tapestry woven from the very fabric of spacetime, a symphony of gravitational waves, neutrino pulses, and exotic particles that defied all known laws of physics. It was a message of that they were certain, but it was a message written in a language that was as old as the universe itself. The task of deciphering it was monumental, a challenge that would require all their ingenuity, all their resources, all their courage. But they were no longer afraid. They were filled with a sense of purpose, a sense of shared destiny that transcended their individual species and their petty differences. They were united, not by fear, but by a common sense of wonder. Dr. Eris Thorne and Admiral Kalin became the unlikely leaders of this new endeavor. The human scientist and the consortium warrior, two beings from vastly different worlds, found a common ground in their shared pursuit of knowledge. They spent long hours together on the bridge of the Vigilance, which had been transformed from a warship into a vessel of exploration, its weapon systems replaced by advanced sensor arrays and powerful research laboratories. They debated, they theorized, they dreamed. They pushed the boundaries of their understanding, challenging each other's assumptions, their minds meeting in a crucible of intellectual fire. Kalin, the stoic warrior, found himself captivated by Thorne's boundless enthusiasm, her ability to see the universe not as a threat, but as a source of endless fascination. And Thorne, the ever-curious scientist, found in Kalin a strength and a wisdom that she had never encountered before, a deep understanding of the delicate balance between power and responsibility. As they delved deeper into the mysteries of the ancient signal, they began to uncover fragments of the message it contained. It was a story, a history of a civilization that had risen and fallen long before the first stars had ignited in the heavens. They were a species of beings who had transcended the limitations of their physical forms, who had become beings of pure energy, their consciousness woven into the very fabric of the cosmos. They were the first ones, the silent architects of the universe, the ones who had seeded the galaxies with the potential for life. And they had left behind a message, a warning, a legacy for the children who would one day follow in their footsteps. The message spoke of a great shadow, a force of entropy and decay that was slowly consuming the universe, a cosmic blight that threatened to extinguish all life, all consciousness, all hope. It was a force they had fought against for eons, a battle that had ultimately cost them their existence. But they had not been defeated. They had left behind a map, a guide to a safe harbor, a sanctuary hidden in the folds of spacetime, a place where life could endure, a place where the light of consciousness could be preserved against the coming darkness. They had left behind a key that would unlock the path to this sanctuary. And that key was the signal itself. The revelation was both terrifying and exhilarating. The universe was not a benign, indifferent place. It was a battlefield, a stage for a cosmic struggle between creation and destruction, between life and oblivion. And they, the young and vibrant civilizations of the galaxy, were now on the front lines of that struggle. They had been given a choice: to cower in fear, to await their inevitable doom, or to stand together to fight for their future, to take up the mantle of the first ones and become the guardians of the light. The choice was clear. The consortium and the humans, once on the brink of war, now stood united, their fleets no longer instruments of destruction, but vessels of exploration, their scientists no longer rivals, but collaborators, their people no longer strangers, but allies. They had been brought together by a common purpose, a shared destiny. The single human ship, the Odyssey, had been the catalyst for this transformation. It had come not as a conqueror, but as a messenger, a bearer of a truth that had shattered their illusions and opened their eyes to a reality far grander and more terrifying than they had ever imagined. The fleet that had been assembled to destroy it had never stood a chance, not because it was outmatched in firepower, but because it was outmatched in vision. The humans had seen a bigger picture, a larger purpose, and they had invited the consortium to share in that vision. As the combined fleets of the consortium and humanity prepared to embark on their great journey, to follow the ancient signal to its source, to unlock the secrets of the first ones, and to find the path to the sanctuary, Dr. Thorne and Admiral Kalin stood once more. On the bridge of the Vigilance, their eyes fixed on the star-dusted expanse of the galaxy. The future was uncertain, filled with peril and with promise, but they were ready, they were united, and they were not afraid. One ship, Kalen said, his voice a low rumble of awe. One ship changed everything. Dr. Thorne smiled, a sad, knowing smile. It wasn't the ship, Admiral, it was the idea that we are not alone, the idea that we are all in this together, the idea that the universe is not something to be conquered, but something to be understood. That is the true power of humanity. Not our weapons, not our technology, but our unyielding, insatiable, and sometimes reckless curiosity, our desire to know, and our willingness to share what we learn. The journey that lay ahead would be long and arduous. The shadow was vast and powerful, but the light of a single candle can illuminate the darkest of rooms, and the combined light of two civilizations, two species, two dreams, could perhaps, just perhaps, be enough to hold back the night. The warship had become a symbol of peace, the fleet a symbol of hope. And the galaxy, once a place of fear and suspicion, had become a canvas upon which they would paint a new future, a future of unity, of discovery, of endless possibility. The true journey had just begun, and the universe, in all its terrible and beautiful majesty, was waiting. They had answered the call from the deep, and in doing so, they had discovered not only the secrets of the cosmos, but the truth of themselves. The fleet had been defeated not by a weapon, but by a question. And in the answering of that question, they had found their salvation,